many years. So it's very good to hear from you.
Right, thank you very much, Nick. I hope you can see the first slide.
Yes, I think
Good.
that looks good. Thank you.
So yes, this is very much a personal view. I've been involved with EVA for about 25 years. So I'm just going to give my experiences of EVA. So I guess this is a talk mostly on the past, a little bit on the present, and we can discuss the future. So the first EVA was in 1990, so we're actually celebrating the 30th anniversary. I wasn't involved with did. Hello?
Hi, Jonathan. We lost you briefly, but I can hear you now.
Yes,
okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So I'm talking about the first EVA, which was in 1990, which I wasn't involved with, but that was held at Imperial College in London. It was organised by Jim Hemsley, and Jim Hemsley is in the audience at the moment from home. There's a picture of him if you don't know him. He's still certainly involved with EVA after all this time. And it came out of the Vasari project, which was an Esprit project involving the National Gallery, looking at trying to digitize pictures at very high quality. So you could use that as a record. So obviously real pictures tend to degrade over time. So the idea was that you could at least record how the picture was at a particular time. And you can read about his reflections in the book. This is the chapter in a book on EVA. So he covers the first 5 years. I'm going to cover now from, he's the father of EVA, as we like to call him, and he's still an honorary member of the committee and so on, and turns up to committee meetings. So my first contact, and this was pre-digital, so this was in 1995, at least pre-digital in a sense, in that this was my diary entry, as you can see, handwritten in my Oxford University diary at the time, slightly degraded, but you can still read it. So this was saying there's a panel session of the National Gallery, which Jim had invited me to. There are the people on it. In fact, I was a sort of also ran in that Jim, I guess, find out that I was involved with museums online with the virtual library museums pages, which I talked about earlier this week. So there's the plus me. So I was added at the last minute to talk about the museums and the web and so on. So I've still got my first leaflet from EVA, which was 1995. So this is what it looked like then. This is pre-EVA, although the web existed then. EVA didn't have a website, so everything was still quite paper-oriented. I think there's at least email addresses on this, but not the web at that point. So this was the 6th meeting. There were panel sessions, so I was involved with this panel session at the bottom. Obviously, the web was developing rapidly at that point. So I think Jim very much realized the web was going to be very important for the area that EVA was interested in. And this was my first paper. So the reason I was invited was that I was very much involved with a directory of museums online, part of the virtual library. So my first paper at EVA was on that. It's called VLMP. I guess now, of course, we have Google and so on, and we've got Wikipedia. So this library is really historical. It still exists, but now we've got much better resources for finding museums online. But at the time, it was, I think, quite a useful resource for museums and museum visitors to find out which museums were online. So there was a special issue. So we haven't had so many special issues, but Jim edited this. There are a number of papers selected from that, and he very kindly selected my paper. So this was a very easy journal paper for me as an academic. We love to have journal papers. So thank you, Jim, for selecting me for that issue. So the back page of the EVA 95 said, come and join EVA 96. And you notice there's, it mentions other EVAs. So although EVA started in London, there were EVAs in Paris and Berlin and Florence by this time. And so EVA was very much developing into an international network of EVAs. This is something that Jim is brilliant at, bringing in other people and getting new conferences started. So this is the EVA 96 itself, and you can see by that time it was brought in Athens, I think. So anywhere around the world was really welcome to try and produce an EVA conference if they wished. And at that time we had quite a lot of tutorials, and because the web was developing, Jim invited me to do tutorials on how to produce web pages for museums and so on, and what this web thing was. At that time a lot of people didn't know much about the web, and being at a university I was in a lucky situation to have my own web server with access and so on. So 97 we're continuing yet more conferences, one at Thessaloniki, this time one in Brussels. So you can see it was quite flexible, but you notice that Paris and Berlin, and also actually not included there, but Florence, some of these conferences have stayed and been annual conferences. Some of them have happened for a year or two. So it's a very flexible community, EVA, in the way you can join it if you want to produce an EVA conference. So I had a little bit of a lull, and I guess Jim, in his wonderful networking way, always gets back to you. So in 2000, he wrote back this little note. I've got a handwritten note that says all this. You notice he says, even then he was in semi-retirement, but actually being Jim, he wasn't really retired. He was busy fostering the EVA community. He said, come along to the EVA Scotland, which happened then. Very sadly, I couldn't go to that because at the time I was getting a new academic job. I was having to do lots of other things. So I wasn't able to participate in that particular EVA conference. But being Jim, he never gives up. By 2003, he said, come back to EVA. And this time he said, come and be a keynote speaker. Well, obviously as an academic, he'd love to be a keynote speaker. And at that time I was getting interested in accessibility for disabled people online, blind people and so on. So that was my talk for this particular conference. And again, Jim is very good at doing other publications, so he included this in a book which is still available, published by Ashgate. So I guess that got me really involved with EVA in 2003, and I've been to every EVA London since then. So I guess I've got quite a good picture of EVA, certainly this century, and a little bit of a picture for last century. And I find it a wonderful community for finding co-authors. So you notice previously in this conference, there have been 2 papers where I've been a co-author, all met through EVA essentially, and we've kept in touch. So if this is your first EVA, I know it's difficult being online, but if we get back to being in reality from next year, we hope, it's a wonderful networking opportunity for new people to collaborate with. I guess one of my biggest collaborations has been with Tula Giannini, because I went as a result of her
Jonathan,
coming
it
to
seems
EVA.
you're frozen. I think the connection's just...
Okay, am I still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're okay for me. So maybe just be your connection, Nick.
Okay, I'll continue. Just say again if there's a problem. So I was, Tula very kindly invited me to teach at Pratt on the web and so on. We then set up the EVA London Symposium, which has happened for the last few years, where we have invited speakers. We've produced a book called Museums and Digital Culture, all as a result really of the EVA community. Sadly, this year we haven't been able to have the EVA Symposium, but the 2 of the speakers, for keynote speakers, were actually due to be in the symposium. So we've still had a sort of symposium through the keynote speakers. And since 2006, I've been even more involved because I've been involved as a co-author, co-editor on the EVA proceedings. And I've done a little, if you read the paper, I've done a little diagram of how editors come and go. So you can see originally Suzanne Keane was very much the driver for the EVA proceedings and the EVA itself, with Jim as a co-editor there, as you see. Then I got more involved from 2006, and you can see the blue dots are the ones with the lead co-editors, and the white dots are the assistant editors. So you see, I was a main editor for a while, then Alan Seal was an editor, Stuart Dunn, who was one of our keynote speakers this year, was an editor, main editor. And then Kia Nung actually did a really good stint of 3 years as the main editor. Sadly, he had to pull out for personal reasons. So I took over after that as the main editor. But you can see there's a trend there that people last for about 3 years as the main editor. And it's a lot of work, to be honest, being editor. And 3 years is probably a good stint being the main editor. You can see now we have John Weinel, who's done 2 years. He's very kindly agreed to do next year. That will be his 3-year stint. And we now have Anne Border, who's volunteered to start to take over as the main editor. So we hope that will work out. You always have to do planning for the future. And I think the best plan for proceedings seems to be a sort of 3-year stint as the main editor. So we hope Anne will be able to do that. So next year, John will still be the main editor, we hope, in 2021. And after that, hopefully Anne will, with the support still of people like, you can see we've got other editors like Nick, and especially Graham is helpful completing the proceedings each year. So we have produced our own book of a collection of papers, somewhat like Jim, with in the days when Suzanne Keane and Kia and I were the editors. This appeared in 2013. Again, we haven't done this recently. Perhaps for the future, this is something we should be doing again. It takes a lot of work, but maybe if we can get some of the editors for the proceedings and choose some good papers, have them reassessed, re-edited and so on for a book, that will be a good plan for the future. So a little bit in the paper on the community of practice, which you may or may not know about, but it's a sort of theoretical way of thinking about how communities work. And when I originally involved with the EVA community, I had no idea about communities of practice. But this theoretical setting for communities looks at communities that have some sort of domain. So obviously we're interested in electronic visualization in the arts. And you have to have a community, and the community has a lot of different levels. So you need a core to it. So you need a champion or more than one champion. And I guess the champions for community, well, originally, obviously Jim and still Jim, but we have an organizing committee that really keeps the conference going and so on. But then outside that, we have a program committee. So that's made up of authors and so on. So if you're an author this year, would like to be on the program committee, please do contact me. I may contact you, and you're very welcome to be on the program committee next year reviewing papers. So that's a bit less of a commitment to the community of EVA, but it means you're still within the community. Then of course we have authors, presenters, you're all members of the community. If this is your first year, welcome to the EVA community. We have delegates who have never presented, and if you're a delegate here, that's great. We hope maybe you'll present something next year. So the pictures on the right show a sort of core of people in the organizing committee, and then some delegates below at a previous conference. And then there's the practice. So for EVA, we're very interdisciplinary. And actually for EVA London, we've really moved into the area of digital art. I guess it's just the way things have moved. Other EVAs are more interested in archaeology, archives, and so on. We have a little bit of that. So we have museum curators and archaeologists and so on. But our core, certainly recently, has been within digital art. So the way communities develop, if you want to start a community, if you're ever thinking of doing this yourself, becoming a Jim Hemsley of some community, you have to start really with some initial community, and EVA started from this European project previously mentioned, Vasari. So that was where I think Jim realized there is a potential for an EVA community outside the Vasari project, which obviously had a limited lifetime. Then you need to get the community going with some sort of rhythm. An annual rhythm works very well. So having an annual conference is a very good way of maintaining a community. And certainly we've had an annual conference in London since the beginning. We've had annual conferences in other cities such as Florence. Paris has started again now. We've had Berlin, Russia, we've had Moscow and St. Petersburg. So we've had annual conferences that have continued, but I guess London is the one that's kept going. We also have a conference in Jerusalem that's kept going as well. And then gradually you mature. So obviously EVA London started, and we've gradually matured with all these other conferences around Europe, especially in the 90s. And now we've got worldwide conferences that have happened. We've had one in Australia, Brazil. We're hoping one might happen in Singapore, elsewhere. If you're listening to this talk somewhere in the world and want to start an EVA conference where you are, do get in touch with the EVA London. We're always very happy to help other EVAs start. In particular, we've now got Terry Trickett, who's going to be talking this afternoon and having a special session on EVA International. So if you're interested in EVA conferences internationally, do come along to that at 2:30. So then you need some sort of stewardship, and you've got to respond to the environment. So EVA London has always collaborated with other organisations. Most recently, with our digital art interests, we've been involved with Art in FLUX, which is a really thriving London-based digital arts group. We've also collaborated with the Lumen Arts Prize, which is the leading international arts prize in for digital art. The Royal College of Art, we had a wonderful event last year, Event 2, which was 50 years on from Event 1, and looking to the future in 49 years time now, we're looking forward to Event 3. Perhaps we'll have another event, 2 point something in the meantime. We've also collaborated with the V&A and so on. So it's very important, if you're setting up a community, that you collaborate with other communities and organisations with similar interests. And then any community will eventually end. Fortunately, EVA isn't ending, but you do have to think about your legacy. So, you know, at some point in the future, EVA wants to think about what its legacy will be. Certainly, we're now setting up an archive. We've got Sean Clark doing that. So that will be part of our legacy, whatever happens. So what I mentioned Art in FLUX, and that's one of our biggest collaborations at the moment with another organisation. They're an incredibly thriving community. We had a wonderful session last night with National Gallery X. If you attended that, you'll know how thriving their community is. And just to select one of their activities, with Afra Shemsa has set up this wonderful interactive digital art website, shemsa.digital, which is dedicated to her grandfather, who was an artist. So you can create digital art based on his artworks. And this is one I created this week. I've called it Circle of Truth. Afterwards, I decided, well, this is obviously representing Biden and the Democrats on the blue side, pushing out Trump in red there, with a little bit of help from the environmentalists in green. So that's my now interpretation of this. So of course, now we're all online. We've been having organisation committee meetings online. Normally we have a wonderful time in London having our meetings. This is us gradually getting more or less bored during the meetings, as you can see. But now we're continuing online. I think we've got one more where, yes, eventually Carl joined us. So we can continue online. It's not quite the same. You can't have a nice drink afterwards and so on in the same way. But we are reacting to the situation that we're in. And of course, it's a bit of a sad situation. This is one sad thing that's happened not so long ago with Kim Feldman, who's been twice a keynote speaker at EVA London, last time in 2017. He's a wonderful person. If you knew him, he always had a twinkle in his eye and a wonderful sense of humor, even when he gave his talks, they were wonderful. But sadly, he's succumbed to COVID-19, which is very sad. But we have got we've dedicated the proceedings this year to Kim, and Carl has done a wonderful eulogy for Kim. And I've updated his Wikipedia page as part of my tribute to him as well. So I can see Nick there waiting in the background. He'll be glad to hear I'm almost finished. But Kim was a great Leonardo da Vinci scholar. And you may have noticed that Tula Giannini and I have also been looking at Leonardo da Vinci, as well as Alan Turing in a paper earlier this conference. And of course, we've been looking at the Last Supper, and this is how people always think the Last Supper is. They've tried to restore the Last Supper to how it used to look. But I can now tell you through extensive research, we've managed to restore the Last Supper to how it really was. Actually, it was a Zoom call, and there you can see Jesus Zoom calling to all the apostles above. So I'll say happy 30th anniversary, EVA London. Thank you especially to Jim. So this particular paper is dedicated to Jim, still semi-retired. Having a social, when I hope some of you can attend, we'll all have a glass of wine with us. If I'm still there, it says my internet is unstable, which probably means Nick wants me to stop. So thank you very much, and back to Nick.
Okay. Well, Jonathan, that's splendid. That's putting that sort of comprehensive but condensed history together. And I think especially the shout out to the international EVAs, and also, of course, the memory of Kim Veltman, and we very much remember him too. So I just think it's just to reiterate what you said about collaboration, about partnership, and also about the connections that we could foster through the network as well. I'm going to have to hand over the questions now. I'm really sorry I've got a further meeting to jump into, but just to say thank you very much to all of our presenters this morning. It's been really fascinating. And I'm looking forward to this afternoon's session, which is, of course, from the international EVAs as well. So thank you very much. I'll leave in the capable hands of Graham, Jonathan, and Sean. All the best.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.